Okay, thank you. Amanda asks, what do you think about having rabbits in a moving cage around blueberries, directly applying their manure without composting?
Oh, that's a great idea. Um, Number one, um, I love talking about manure, and I love rabbit manure. Anything that's pelleted is a great manure to use straight on the plants because the plants are up and off the ground. So your fruit is not, and that's crucial. I think if the important thing here is, remember I was talking about the splash factor. So if it's raining, if it rained really hard, would that splash up and touch that fruit that was on the bottom part of the branches? So you might, if you're going to go into an active way of fertilizing your blueberries like that, I think you might want to prune the plants accordingly because sometimes they'll get pretty heavy and those lower branches might be um, accessible for contamination if it rained hard and it splashed, it hit the manure and splashed back up. But I think that's a good idea. Go for it.
We have another question about animals and growing ground. Ron says that they have ground on which they've had chickens over the winter. Now they want to plant vegetables on that ground. The chickens are gone. How would the 90 or 120-day rule apply? And also, would trellis crops like peas be considered the same as corn?
As long as with the peas, I think yes, because they're up off the ground. Uh, then by the 120-day rule is going to be very specific to what type of crops you have there. You see, this is not an easy question. I'm thinking about this. You've had the chickens in that area. Now, I mean, I can't imagine planting right into something that had chickens in it right away because to me it seems like it would burn, but maybe I mean I would think you'd need to wait a period of time or solarize it or something because their manure is so hot that it would seem detrimental to be able to do that without doing some kind of crop that would be up off the ground in the first place. I think if you did any kind of greens that they would be burned, but maybe Glenn has some perspective on that for planting right into some place that have been chickens. But I think in the rotation you'd still have to go with that 90 to 120-day rule to make sure that you, number one, weren't burning your plants, but also the contamination factor. I just don't think the manure would be broken down enough to plant right into right away. I mean, if I were trying something like that, I would probably do some kind of cover crop first and then turn that cover crop in before I planted in it, but just because I think it'd be too hot. But think of that splash factor when whatever you're planting when it comes to the contamination issue with manure. You could, so maybe you need to consider planting corn or pole beans, or I think the peas, as long as you weren't picking the bottom peas, would probably be all right as well. So I don't know if I'm giving you an answer that you want. I'm thinking through the process, so that's what I got to say about that.
Okay, thank you, Diane. For Ron, he said just in general about how they use well water in the field. They have a processing station and have extended a line from their domestic well water system out to the processing station in the field. And that's how
Okay.
they're working out in the field. Um, and he also says it's a good answer on the chicken manure. Thanks.
Oh, good.
He has one more question. He said that they rent farmland and their landlord has a dog that roams free around the farm, including in the garden. Are they in violation of the quote manure regs to have that dog on their property?
Um, well, only if the dog's pooping. You know, some dogs can. I know an awful lot of people let dogs in their gardens. We do not, and by the organic standards are not supposed to allow dogs or cats in our garden. Well, yeah, I can keep the dogs out, and I can keep the gates open, and the dogs are trained to not go in there. Other people I know that have dogs who let them go in the garden have trained those dogs to not poop in the garden. Um, Personally, like I said, we don't let our dogs in the garden, and whenever the organic inspector is here and if they ever comment about the cats in the garden, I tell them, oh yeah, we've trained them not to poop in the garden too, but really, you can't train a cat to do anything, and I'm happy to have the cat. I mean, I have the cats there to catch the gophers, and um, I'd much rather have that factor. So yeah, I know the cats are pooping in there because that's their big, beautiful 2.5 acre fenced-in cat box. So I'm sure there's some contamination happening there. But once the plants get up to size and are um, growing well, the likelihood of that cat poop causing too much trouble, I do not include that in my organic system plan, I can tell you that much. But keeping the cats out, not so easy. Keeping the dogs out, I mean, as long as you can keep them from pooping in the fields, you're probably doing the best you can. Good luck with that.
Okay, thank you. Well, that wraps up our questions for this evening. I want to thank both Glenn and Diane for your presentations tonight. And to move on to our next slides, I have a few things that I want to go over regarding the course. So, next slide, Cinda. So this week, tonight, again, we have a webinar survey. Thanks to all of you who completed last week's survey. We really appreciate it. Our recorded webinar will be posted on the course website tomorrow. And the assignments and discussion forum are posted. And I wanted to point out that there are a lot of great food safety materials online. Many of them are links within week 8 of the course website. And I'd also encourage you to go back up to week 5, where the Idaho Protecting Your Farm and Ranch Assets Regulations Handbook is posted, and the Washington State Small Farm Direct Marketing Handbook that contains regulations is posted, so that you can look and find the resources nearest you, so you can call your health department and different state agencies to find out what the rules and regs are for your system. Because as Diane said, it's really important to know what those rules are and then to do a lot of planning and document what you're doing so that you know that you're assuring food safety. And there's definitely a lot of resources out there to help you think through what your potential sources of contamination are and to develop actual assessment plans. One of the publications that's linked to on the course website is from Cornell University, and they have a whole set of good agricultural practices which relate to food safety, and I've provided a link to their spreadsheets that help you go through and identify potential sources of contamination and be able to start to develop ways that you can mitigate any potential contamination. We had a question about assignments and how long people will have to complete them. In order to get a course certificate, all your assignments will need to be completed no later than the end of April, and that includes an end-of-course evaluation that will come to you in late April. And certificates of completion for this course will go out the 1st of May. So next week is our last webinar, and we're going to be wrapping everything up, and we're going to have some great stories of how people have used the information in this course to make some changes and develop some plans for their farms. And then we'll have a guest who took this course in 2012, and she'll be talking about what she learned and how she applied it to her farm over the last couple of years. Next slide. So again, thank you for participating in tonight's webinar, and please take time to complete our webinar survey, and we will see you next Tuesday for our last webinar for this course. Thanks again and have a great night.